On August 20th, 2004, 12-year-old Garrett Bardsley was camping near Kuberant Lake in Utah with his father Kevin Bardsley and his Boy Scout troop, which included 18 scouts and 7 adults. Early that morning, Garrett and Kevin decided to go fishing at a pond about 150 yards from their campsite. Around 8 a.m., Garrett slipped into the water, soaking his shoes and socks, which prompted him to return to camp to change. Since other adults were at the camp and it was just minutes away, Kevin let him go alone. He watched as Garrett walked down the path until he was out of sight, then continued fishing. Unbeknownst to Kevin, this would be the last time he ever saw his son. After 15 more minutes of fishing, Kevin decided to head back to camp to check on Garrett. When he arrived, he was shocked to find that his son wasn't there. He asked the other scouts if they had seen Garrett, but no one had. Kevin was immediately concerned by his son's absence, as the campsite was very close to their fishing spot, and Garrett should have been at the camp by then. In a panic, Kevin gathered the other adults and some scouts to search for Garrett in the immediate area. Since Garrett had just disappeared, the group was initially optimistic they'd find him, believing he couldn't have gone far in such a brief time. However, as day turned into night, they still hadn't found a single trace of Garrett and were growing increasingly worried. The scouts and adults were baffled that Garrett could have gone missing in such a short time frame within the less than 150-yard distance from where his father had last seen him to the camp. As night approached and the group realized they wouldn't be able to find him without help, they decided to alert rangers. A search plane flew over the area that night, accompanied by a helicopter with a spotlight, but unfortunately, these efforts were fruitless. The next day, the official search for Garrett began, involving over 200 search and rescue professionals as well as volunteers. With the help of dogs and aircrafts, they combed every inch of a 5-square-mile area over the following week. The only evidence ever found was a Nike sock about a half a mile from where Garrett disappeared, but it's unclear if it even belonged to him, as one of the searchers reported losing a sock in that area. Since nothing else concrete was discovered, the official search was called off after 9 days. Garrett's father and some volunteers would continue searching weekly until October of 2004, but despite these extensive efforts, not a single trace of Garrett was ever discovered. Among the many unsolved disappearances in national forests, Garrett Bardsley's case is particularly baffling due to its strange timeline. The fact that he vanished within such close proximity to his campsite was perplexing and was only made even more puzzling by the fact that the search for him started less than 30 minutes after he was last seen. Garrett's case also shares a similarity with many other strange forest disappearances. The search dogs didn't pick up a single trace of him. Although this is not unheard of, it's peculiar in this instance considering his exact location was known. These bizarre circumstances led to many theories about what might have happened to Garrett. One theory is that he might have been attacked by an animal and was taken from the area, as this could explain how he vanished so quickly. Several factors contradict this theory, however. According to Kevin, Garrett had a fishing rod with him when he was walking back to camp. If Garrett had been attacked, he would almost certainly have dropped the rod. It's highly unlikely that he would have held on to it if he was ambushed, but this fishing rod was never discovered, and there was no evidence such as clothing fibers or signs of a struggle in the area. Furthermore, Garrett was within shouting distance of both his father and the camp, so if an animal had attacked, someone would very likely have heard something, but no one did. To many, it just seems very improbable that an animal could have attacked Garrett in the few minutes it would have taken him to return to camp without leaving any evidence behind or making any sound. Another theory was that Garrett had got lost on his way back to camp, which seems more probable but also has some flaws. Considering how quickly the search began, it's unlikely that he went so far in such a short period that he wouldn't have heard the other scouts and adults calling for him. They covered a considerable distance looking for Garrett, so if he was lost in the area, he almost certainly would have heard their voices and come to them. Other theories have been proposed over the years, but none have been able to explain both Garrett's rapid disappearance and the complete lack of evidence. The fact that the search for Garrett began so soon after he was last seen, yet nothing was found, makes his case stand out among others. While it's not hard to imagine a young individual getting lost in the woods, Garrett's proximity to the camp makes his case particularly perplexing. The vanishing of Garrett Bardsley is a stark reminder that in national parks, danger can occur in minutes. On May 25, 1999, 69-year-old Carl Herbert Landers was on the fourth day of a hiking trip at Mount Shasta in California, accompanied by his two close friends, Barry Gilmore and Milton Gaines. The group aimed to eventually reach the highest point of the mountain at just over 14,000 feet elevation. Early that morning, they woke up at their campsite about 9,300 feet up the mountain, with the goal of getting to the next camp point known as Helen Lake, just over 1,000 feet higher. By this time, after several days of climbing, Carl began experiencing altitude sickness due to the decreasing oxygen levels. Concerned that he might slow down his friends, Carl decided to get a head start to the next campsite so he would be there when they arrived. At around 9 a.m., Carl packed his bag and began making his way up the mountain. Unbeknownst to Barry and Milton, this would be the last time Carl Landers was ever seen. After staying at the campsite for a while longer, Barry and Milton began their ascent to meet Carl at Helen Lake. As they got closer, they quickly realized that he was nowhere to be found on the trail. Barry and Milton immediately alerted Forest Service rangers about their missing friend, and later that afternoon, a search for him commenced. National Park Service personnel and the National Guard conducted an extensive search over the next few hours using helicopters equipped with infrared technology, but they couldn't locate Carl. The next morning, 50 people, including rangers and volunteers, hiked up Mount Shasta to search for Carl. They meticulously combed the entire route from Carl's camp to Helen Lake, but found absolutely no trace of him. Despite further searches in the following days, Carl was never found. The most mysterious aspect of Carl Landers' disappearance revolves around the location where he vanished. The Avalanche Gulch route leading to Helen Lake is an open space with few trees. The area is clear of obstructions for a mile on either side of the path, and there are no known crevasses or side trails where someone could get lost. In the summertime, the area is essentially an open field. This factor makes Carl's disappearance all the more perplexing. Because the area is so exposed, there was nowhere on the mountain where he could have been hidden. Infrared technology from the search helicopters should have easily detected him, as there was a clear view of the area from above. This ruled out the possibility that he had suffered an emergency, potentially stemming from altitude sickness, and was just somewhere on the route, as he would have been impossible to miss. The unobstructed view also made it unlikely that Carl had gotten lost, as it would have been akin to getting lost in an open field with high visibility. Furthermore, an animal attack was unlikely, as it would have had to drag Carl a considerable distance to reach a hidden area, which would have left behind evidence like clothing fibers or parts from Carl's bag that would have been easy to spot. But this begs the question, what then could have happened to Carl? When it comes to wilderness disappearances, the majority occur in densely forested areas where finding someone can be extremely difficult. However, when someone vanishes from an open area, the possibilities become far more perplexing, as this eliminates simple explanations like getting lost. Since no concrete evidence regarding Carl's whereabouts was ever discovered, and there was no logical reason he wouldn't have been on the mountain, it seems almost impossible to determine what happened to him. Some even suspected that the only possible explanation was that Barry and Milton might have done something to Carl and covered it up with the story of him going up the mountain alone. Carl's family members told the news that Barry and Milton were longtime close friends with Carl, making it very unlikely that both were involved in a cover-up. Additionally, a detail discovered in the investigation seemed to corroborate Barry and Milton's story. According to news reports, a Forest Service ranger told searchers after Carl's disappearance that he spoke with an older man near Helen Lake about climbing routes on the day Carl disappeared. Although the ranger wasn't certain that the man he talked to was Carl, the timeline suggests it was likely him. If it was Carl, then this supports Barry and Milton's account. But if Carl had already been at his intended destination, the question remains, where could he have gone after? He wouldn't have gone farther up the mountain, since the plan was to wait for his friends, and he couldn't have gone down the mountain, as he would have crossed paths with Barry and Milton. If he was anywhere else, the infrared cameras should have picked him up, since the whole area was unobstructed. Since Carl's disappearance, his case has become one of the most perplexing wilderness vanishings in history. With numerous reports of bizarre and unexplained activity at Mount Shasta over the years, it truly leaves us to wonder what really happened to Carl Landers. On April 11, 2019, 68-year-old Kat Hammond set out on a hike through Canon del Diablo, or Devil's Canyon, in Mexico's Sierra de San Pedro Martir National Park. She was joined by 6 friends and her husband, Warren. While the group began their hike early that morning, Warren stayed in his car, parked near the start of the trailhead. Unfortunately, about 10 minutes into the hike, Kat aggravated a leg injury she had sustained earlier in the month, making it extremely painful for her to continue walking. Not wanting to slow the group down, she told them she would just wait by the natural pool near the trail with her dog Tootsie until they returned from the hike. This was the last time anyone ever saw Kat Hammond. Since the hike that the group had planned for that day was rather short, they returned to the spot where Kat was supposed to be waiting within an hour and a half. Upon arriving at the pool, they expected to see Kat, but found no trace of her or her dog. Assuming she had walked back to her husband's car, the group went to check, but to their shock, Warren confirmed that he hadn't seen her since they left that morning. Fearing the worst at that point, the group contacted the authorities. A large-scale search operation ensued, involving search and rescue professionals, the Mexican military, local fire departments, volunteers, multiple dogs, and helicopters. Over the next 48 hours, extensive ground and aerial searches were conducted in the area where Kat disappeared, but absolutely nothing was found. With no trace of Kat, the resources used for the search could not be justified, and it was called off just days later. The circumstances surrounding Kat Hammond's sudden disappearance left everyone who knew her puzzled. There was no logical reason for Kat to have left the area voluntarily, especially since she had clearly informed her group that she would be staying put. Additionally, her injury made walking extremely painful, so it's unlikely she would have gone anywhere else unless she was forced to do so. Some have suggested that Kat might have been removed from the area by an animal, but the absence of any signs of struggle or blood makes it unlikely that an attack occurred. It's hard to believe an animal could have attacked Kat and somehow moved both her and her dog out of the area without leaving behind a single trace. When someone goes missing in a national park, the common assumption is that they got lost. However, this explanation doesn't fit Kat's situation either. Because of her injury, she likely wouldn't have attempted to wander off anywhere she could get lost. Even if she did, the trail was well marked and the spot where she was supposed to stay put was only a 10-minute walk from the parking area where her husband was waiting. If Kat had left for any reason and gotten lost, the question remains: where could she have gone? Given her impaired mobility, she wouldn't have been able to get far before search teams arrived. Some searchers were convinced it would have been nearly impossible not to find her if she was still in the area. Another more sinister theory is that Kat fell victim to foul play by an unknown third party and was taken from the trail, which could explain why she wasn't found by searchers or dogs in the area. This theory has significant flaws as well, however. For it to be plausible, an opportunistic assailant would have had to randomly encounter Kat after her group left, decide to risk attacking her despite her being with her dog, and then dispose of both without leaving any evidence or signs of a struggle. But where could someone have taken Kat and her dog without being noticed? Kat's husband saw no one at the trailhead, and the hiking group went along the whole trail and back without encountering anyone. This suggests that the perpetrator would have had to carry Kat and her dog off trail to leave the park, which would have been very difficult in that time span. Given these factors, it seems unlikely that someone with malicious intent would have happened upon Kat while she was alone and managed to take her and her dog without being seen by anyone in the park. While there are other disappearances involving individuals who were meant to stay put at a specific location like Kat's, her case is particularly perplexing due to her injury at the time of her vanishing. This detail adds a degree of mystery that raises numerous questions. Did Kat leave her spot voluntarily? If so, why? And where could she have gone that searchers and dogs couldn't find her? If she was taken, where might the perpetrator have taken her, and what could their motivations have been? The answers to these questions remain elusive, leaving Kat Hammondtree's disappearance shrouded in mystery.